Hi, I'm Bob Hitchens from SolarWise Wagga. I'm often asked in regard to adding a battery to a solar system, is it actually worth it? Well, I believe it is, but there's quite a few things you need to consider before you go and take the plunge of adding a battery. So, what's the main battery addition premise? Well, during the day, the battery is to be charged using solar energy, pretty straightforward. And at sundown or during bad weather, the battery takes over and supplies energy to the home. So just look at a situation on a customer's site here where the customer has solar and a battery. So the blue lines represent the solar output in the middle of the day. The black lines represent the excess solar going back into the grid. The orange line is the consumption for the customer, and the one we're interested in is the green lines. So at the bottom of the graph, you can see the battery discharge level going down to almost zero, so that as it discharges overnight, and then the sun comes up and then the battery charges up, and round about probably the 11:30 mark the battery's full, and it sits there waiting till sundown where it starts discharging again, so covering the nighttime consumption of electricity basically. So let's quantify the benefits. The most important thing to remember is battery addition only impacts the electricity component of a power bill, not the supply charge. That happens regardless of how much electricity you use. Charging the battery is at the feed-in tariff cost, in other words, what you get for solar when you send it back to the grid. The cost saving is the average imported electricity price less the feed-in tariff. In other words, everything you have to buy in at night time minus what you get for your solar. And of course, you put solar into the battery, you're going to reduce the amount of solar energy exported, and thus the dollars that you're going to get for the solar. So let's look at a benefit example. So here I've looked at a range of differentials between the average imported energy cost and the feed-in tariff of 35, 40 and 45 cents. I've highlighted two key areas, if you like. One, 13 kilowatt hours of imported energy that's covered, or 17. 13 is probably fairly typical of what a Tesla Powerwall battery can manage. So, what can you spend on a battery? Well, using that middle example of a 40-cent differential and 17 kilowatt hours of electricity imports that are covered, the annual saving is $2,048. For a 10-year payback, you can spend just over $20,000, or an 8-year payback, you can spend just over $16,000. If you're only covering 13 kilowatt hours of electricity imports at that same differential, well, the savings is $1,566. For a 10-year payback, you can spend up to $15,660, or an 8-year payback, you can spend up to $12,500. So those battery costings, if you like, are pretty realistic and quite manageable, I think, in most cases. However, if your import needs are lower than 13 kilowatt hours a day, and I would suggest for the small, medium to small households, that will be the situation. Payback periods are likely to be over 10 years. That may not be quite nice. Often, though, there is surplus energy stored in the battery, and that's really good because selling surplus energy back to the grid is a really viable option. How is this done? Well, sending back to the grid is done using virtual power plants, or VPPs, such as provided by the likes of Origin, AGL and Amber. Selling back to the grid generally takes place in peak demand periods, which is when feed-in tariffs go high, generally late afternoon, sometimes breakfast time. And each day there's a little trickle of surplus energy at better prices going back into your credit, if you like. Spike events occur often when the grid has supply problems, and that can pay up to 300 times regular feed-in tariffs for a short period, and that's where the money is. However, you've got to beware. VPPs vary in how their business models operate. So, is it worth it? Well, adding a battery can be financially viable. You do need to quantify your export and import levels, and you can do this with either data from your solar system or from your power bills. You do need to take into account all aspects of your reasons for adding a battery, and you must match the battery capacity with both your export and import levels. For example, if you're only exporting 5 kilowatt hours a day, there's no point putting a 13 kilowatt hour battery on because you won't be able to fill it. The take-home message. If electricity importation is low, covering nighttime consumption is not enough to ensure comfortable returns. Organising to sell surplus stored energy back to the grid is a must-do task for viability and significant income generation. And finally, you may just want a battery, and financial returns are not crucial, but that's another story. So if you want more information, give me a call at SolarWise Wagga on 0269710084.